explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of Breaking History. How are you doing, Gordon?
I'm good, Matt. How are you today?
I'm okay. I'm all right. We were just chatting a little bit before the show, as we often do, about some of the angles we're going to take. We're going to freestyle, as we often do as well. But our minds are definitely focused on common concerns, similar points or threads that we're both pulling at. So I think we're going to have some good chats, some good conversation, and bring up some good and some bad scenarios that are at play right now. Obviously, there's a lot of reason to be hopeful. A lot of very good battles are happening, but at the same time, there's always the shadow of ghouls and arsonists that a lot of people don't pay enough attention to. So it's always good for us to focus a little bit on some of the points of concern. So before we jump into any of that, let's start the day, as we often do as well, with a word from our sponsor, Goldco. So let me just read that, and then we'll jump into it. The last 4 years have put so much stress on American family finances. Help end the stress now and celebrate the golden age with President Trump by diversifying with gold and silver. Remember President Trump's first term? Gold increased by 55%. Don't wait. Diversify your hard-earned assets and buy your gold from Goldco with no purchase minimums. Goldco has been established as a top-rated precious metals company and a leader in the gold industry, providing white glove treatment for over 10 years. Their buyback guarantee assures you that if your situation changes, they will repurchase your metals at the best price, providing you with peace of mind. You may even qualify for up to 10% back in bonus silver. Visit badlandsgold.com to claim your free information and instantsilver.com/badlands to see how much free silver you can get. Find out the relationship between gold, silver, Trump, and you with the free report focused on Trump and your financial future. That's badlandsgold.com and instantsilver.com/badlands to take control of your financial destiny. Okay. So we were chatting a little bit about some of the hype surrounding the oncoming disclosure of files pertaining to the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And there's some good and some worrisome aspects to this. So I don't know, Gordon, what caught your mind about this? Is this all amazing, or what do you see as a point of concern to be aware of?
Well, okay, so it's positive that, well, the FBI comes out and says, yeah, we found these, 2,400 files. Great, wonderful, fantastic. This is before Kash Patel has been installed officially as FBI director. So what role he played in that occurring, we probably will never know, because he can't admit that he had a hand in it. Otherwise, that could raise questions. So as of right now, we can't credit Kash Patel with this because he officially is not the director of the FBI yet. That alone is a little concerning. That alone is a little concerning that this is coming from just the same FBI that has done a lot of these other horrible things that we all have witnessed, right? That's number one. But the fact that we're getting these files to at all, great. That's progress. Okay. I think the thing that's more concerning to me, and I know a number of other people, particularly on Badlands, have expressed the same sentiment, is this idea that we're getting what feels like a limited hangout. We're getting the makings of, the trappings of a limited hangout, where Anna Paulina Luna, as Ash Epps pointed out like a week ago, said, I have a groundbreaking announcement that's going to impact the entire country next Tuesday. Tune in. And then she was like, Tuesday at 3 p.m. Tune in. And so we did, Ash and I hosted the live stream of when they did this announcement. And I said to Ash before, I was like, this better be good or she can never do this again. This better be something that actually amounts to something. Right. And I mean, all she basically said was yeah, we're forming a task force and we're going to do some research and investigate, and we'll circle back and let y'all know what we find. And it's okay. That was not groundbreaking. That was not promising. This kind of feels in the same vein of, we are writing a strongly worded, here's a strongly worded letter. It's the same energy as the strongly worded letter crap. And it's just well, if if you really want to regain the trust of the public and restore trust, just release all the files online. Just take all the files that you just received, dump them all online, be like, here's the hyperlink. Here's what, like, if she had announced that yesterday, that would have been like delivering, in my opinion. That would have been like, hell yeah, let's go. Here, all the remaining files, done. No, like unredacted, everything, go.
Sure.
If she had done that, that would have been a home run grand slam. But she didn't do that. She said, you will be hearing back from us in the future. Basically, this was like kicking the can down the road, like punting the football down the field, whatever metaphor you want to use. This was like, I know I promised that I was going to, deliver something today, but not yet. Just hold on to your seat. Like, here it comes. And there are things about her that we can talk about that concern me as well, like personal stuff, that personal connections and stuff.
Well, what's her position on the task force, or what is her relationship to the task force in the first place? I'm not even clear on that.
So, I mean, I'm just looking at it here. I'll go ahead and just share this Fox News article, because that's good.
Okay.
That's going to give you the best version of the limited hangout. The headline is Anna Paulina Luna to lead task force on declassification of JFK assassination records, Epstein client list. Luna will lead the task force on the declassification of federal secrets.
Wow.
Yeah, so it seems like it says Paulina Luna will lead a new task force focused on the classification of federal secrets, including records related to the assassinations of JFK, RFK, and Dr. Martin Luther King, and other documents in the public interest. Fox News Digital has learned. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer appointed Luna to chair the task force on the declassification of secrets. Luna is expected to focus on examining the declassification of materials in the public interest, including the client list of Jeffrey Epstein and files relating to September 11th, COVID-19, UFOs, and more.
Wow.
Okay, so here's where I get a little like, let's just crawl inside of this psyop and just work with what we're being told. All right, let's dismiss any other speculative analysis we've done in the past about, like, who we think's a good guy, who we think's a bad guy. Like, let's just put that all aside for a second and just look at what happened yesterday. So James Comer was put in charge of a federal oversight committee, right? That was done, I think, under the Biden administration by, I think it was Mike Johnson who did that. Why hasn't, I guess my first question is, how does James Comer, after being in charge of this thing for a number of years now, how does James Comer stand up there next to Anna Paulina Luna and listen to her say over and over again, we've been stonewalled, we've been stonewalled, we've been stonewalled by all these people, and that ends now? How does that end now? Like, she never explained how that ended now. What are you going to do to end it now? Comer, how does she have more power now than you had? How are you not able to, like, whatever it is that Anna Paulina Luna is about to do, James Comer, why weren't you already doing it? How weren't you able to do it? And basically, he's just passing the bill off to her and being like, all right, now you're in charge of this situation, and you can be blamed when it doesn't amount to what people expect it to amount to. That's like, those are just the pragmatic, like, realistic questions of James Comer. How do you not feel embarrassed, like, standing next to her as she's saying all this stuff, and you aren't humiliated right now because she's talking about you being stonewalled and you being, like, stood up and you basically being subverted? There was no mention, by the way, during any of that of, like, prosecuting the people who are doing the stonewalling. Like, why wouldn't you criminal indictments for every person who's obstructing the release process? You are obstructing justice. This is justice in the sense of releasing the truth to the public. These people are subverting that. Arrest them. Like, why aren't you arresting them? At the very least, why aren't you making their names known publicly? Here's the list of people who have stood up and tried to stop us. Boom, 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 boom. Congratulations, you're famous, and your life will never be comfortable again. Like, that could be another tactic. There's so many different ways that you could have addressed this before yesterday. It just felt like the makings of, like, a look at me, like, this is like we're gonna make a new Fox News TV star. Her name's Anna Paulina Luna. She's this hot chick who's the new hot girl in Congress, and she's gonna be, the attractive girl who really sticks it to them. Like, it feels like we're watching a really silly daytime soap opera, and Anna Paulina Luna is the star.
So, what is it about Anna Paulina Luna that causes alarm bells to ring for you, because she causes alarm bells to ring for me too, and I haven't done like as thorough of an examination of her bio as I want to, but from what I have looked at, tons and tons of very, very shady tells that indicate something very nefarious, like untrustworthy, let's say, behind her. And what caught your eye? What are some of those things that bothered you?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And to be fair to Anna Paulina Luna, I have not done like a deep dive on her. So like, I don't have but so much.
I could have done a really untasteful joke just there, but yeah, go ahead.
Good one. Like I haven't done the deep dive, and I've only, this is all kind of like surface level, kind of since the announcement yesterday. And a lot of this stuff is coming from, the MSM, which you have to take with a grain of salt. So a lot of this stuff is just is like, is it even real? Is it whatever. What I do know about her is I do know that she is hyper Zionist. She has expressed like a worship like admiration for Bibi Netanyahu. That always gives me pause for any congressman when they do that, because it signals to me that they have a conflict of allegiance between the American people, like their duty as a congressman, and their duty to either their donors or a foreign lobby or like a foreign interest. And then you kind of like loop in this kind of stuff. This has been published everywhere. Like here's this has been published by like Israel Times, like all these different outlets have published this over the years about her. This is from the Jewish Journal. It says Rep. Anna Paulina Luna, who claimed Jewish heritage, instead reportedly had a grandfather who fought for the Nazis. And I only bring this up because you and I have talked about this so many times before. But basically, it's, as I understand it, and I don't really know her whole story, but it says that she beat a Jewish Democrat to represent her district in Congress last fall, but she had a Jewish ancestry too, or so she claimed at the time. The freshman representative told Jewish Insider during her campaign that she was a small fraction Ashkenazi, in addition to having been raised a Messianic Jew by my father, while mainstream Judaism does not consider Messianic Jews who believe in the divinity of Jesus to be Jewish. Luna's additional claim of Ashkenazi heritage was of enough interest to her for her to use it to deflect accusations that her political ally, the far right MTG, was anti-Semitic. So basically, she used it as like a cloak of protection to defend MTG, who was being accused of, I guess, being a Nazi or something, right? Basically she claimed to be Jewish. She claimed to be a Jewish person who believes in Jesus. That's fine, like whatever. I don't really care about that. And now people dug on her years ago and learned that she had an ancestor who fought in the Third Reich. Like, again, it's like, we're not going to hold people responsible for what their ancestors did necessarily, unless, of course, they're doing the same thing or following the pattern of behavior. I do find that kind of interesting, though, that you have someone claiming to be Jewish and then, of course, their family served in the Third Reich. Like, those patterns are just there. Like, those patterns are just there over and over and over again. It's very interesting. I don't really have a fully formed thesis on it, but it's certainly interesting. But what does make this all notable is, like I said before, she has like a divine worship of Israel and the worship of Netanyahu. And with everything happening right now in the geopolitical space, in Congress, with Trump's rhetoric and all this, that's concerning. Not to mention the fact, like, as we have covered on this show many times, all of the different disclosures that we just listed off, JFK, RFK, 9/11, COVID potentially, all of those things have like Israeli connections, like connections to Israel. And it's like, does that create a conflict of interest for her when she goes to disclose this stuff? Like that then would be the motive for the limited hangout from her perspective. If she really has like this really high opinion and reverence for the state of Israel and doesn't want to see it besmirched, and learns through these documents that Israel was involved in any of this stuff, does she have an inclination to, like put some window dressing on that and try to like water that down a little bit and try to like re-represent it or like repackage it so it comes off a little different than what the actual truth is? Those are the concerns that I have. And there are a lot of people in the Republican Party who would do exactly that, by the way.
Yeah, those are very, very important points. Yeah, it caught me a little off guard too when I was looking through her bio and a little bit of her history. I watched a few of her interviews as well, just to get a sense of like where is she coming from, how is she thinking, what is her background. I was a little bit shocked as well when I encountered the Messianic Judaism, or that she was raised a Messianic Jew. But it's weird too, because there's these contrary reports too, where her mother had given an interview saying that actually no, her father was Catholic and not a Messianic Jew. So she's saying that her father, who's a guy who's in and out of jail on all sorts of drug crimes, other things, seems to be a very abusive character, raised her as something which he wasn't, which is an anomaly. And then, from us who have looked at the occult underpinnings of the Reich, of the Third Reich, of the occult underground of the deep state, and its direct continuity to the satanic agencies that created the Crusades, that generated the Knights of Malta, the Knights of Saint John of Jerusalem, which was really a Gnostic order that oversaw the Crusades, as well as the Knights Templar. So there's these these things that I know oversaw the Rosicrucian revival in the 19th century under Eliphas Levi and Edward Bulwer-Lytton. Those were like two major occultists who oversaw the occult revival that spawned things like Theosophy. So like Madame Blavatsky, and then her followers like Annie Besant and Alice Bailey, who was overseeing the creation of you have it today, right, in New York at the United Nations, the whole Temple of Understanding, the invocation of the New Age. And they were running things like Lucifer Publishing, right? And then they changed it to Lucius Trust, but it was first called Lucifer Publishing, based on their interpretation that, Christ is Lucifer, that it's the Sethian Gospels that set the serpent, the spirit that animated the serpent of Genesis was actually the same spirit that created an avatar of the Christ that had a secret doctrine for his inner elites, his favorites, especially his sacred whore, Mary Magdalene, who he created a secret gospel with and had secret children with. And they have this whole thing. They have their own alternative story of what Christianity means. Yeah.
Isn't that like what the Da Vinci Code kind of tried to pull with Tom Hanks, like with the the book and then the movie? Like, didn't they kind of try to act like there was a bloodline of Christ that was still living, and there were like he had children, secret children with? I just remember that from the like I don't fully remember the movie, but there was a lot of occult stuff in the movie. I do remember that, and then it was basically at the end you kind of learned that the woman who was helping him the whole time was, I think purportedly like the blood of Christ, like she was the direct descendant of Jesus and like his great granddaughter or whatever. And that was kind of what they were getting at, was like there was this holy occult faction that had to protect the bloodline of Jesus, like kind of what you're describing.
Yeah, that film was, so Dan Brown's book that the film was based on, and I recommend people should watch it if they want to know exactly, like, sort of in a simplistic fashion. Obviously, It's watered down for mass consumption, but if they want to know the essentials of the formula of how this thing works, watch the Da Vinci Code. Don't waste your time reading the book, because the movie's pretty loyal to the book.
Yeah.
But it's based upon the research that was done first by Michael Baignan, and I forget this other guy's name, who wrote a book in the early 80s called Holy Blood, Holy Grail, that that formulated this in the most sort of public manner. And that content was then used for the Da Vinci Code book by Dan Brown later. Now, Michael Baignan was himself, and I think he's still alive, or maybe he just recently died. He was a high initiate of the Quatuor Coronati Lodge, which you and I have talked about. That was the Freemasonic Research Lodge created by King Edward VII and Sir Charles Warren, that oversaw the plan to create political Zionism in the 1860s, right? As well as Christian Zionism. So it was an amplifier. And it was very much tied to these occult, Anglican, Jesuitical inner elites that had been trying to sort of religious engineering society towards a sort of outcome that's tied to the Templar obsession with rebuilding Solomon's temple, creating a new sort of revival of the ancient pagan deities, right? That was what their objective was. Human sacrifice, all the stuff that they saw associated with what they wanted to believe Solomon was about. That was all part of their thing. Now, so yes, in that, people will notice there's some weird stuff where, like, you know, this St. Clair family, that's like one of the dominant families. It's a real family. It's one of the dominant that they claim to have the greatest density of Jesus's blood, because Jesus had babies that were, you know, raised in southern France, and the Cathars had their own belief in this thing too. And that does seem to be a real thing. Now, in the film, they have an offshoot of the Knights of Malta that was created in the 1920s called Opus Dei that does exist. It's got big penetrations into the U.S. In Washington, and it uses the front of being Catholic, but they're not. They think it's all a giant fake sacred lie to manage the human herd, except the difference between the Opus Dei and the radical Knights of Malta inner elite, the only difference that they have with their opposing rivals, which are those Jesuits that are the continuity of the Knights of Templar, the Knights of Solomon's Temple, is that one side believes that we should reveal the fakery of the idea that Christ is divine, and that he was indeed a man who tapped into the sacred truth of sacred sex. So that's what they believe, which is where in the movie you always have these illusions that she has these fragmentary memories, right? As she was a daughter, a girl being raised by her grandfather, who was a grand master, and she had these fragmentary memories of walking into these orgies where everyone's wearing Venetian masks, having sex, right? And she's like, where are these memories coming from? And then you discover that her grandfather, the guy who like got killed, he ends up dying, but that he's actually loyally a virtuous character, and that this cult that's been defending her bloodline is actually, and that she comes to terms with, which are sort of the continuity of the Templars. They're part of this like feminine sexual energy grouping of the Templars that are like all about preparing for disclosure that Christ actually was a divine sex being, a Sethian figure, whereas
a sex god. He's like a sex symbol.
Yeah, he's a sex. Yeah, and you got it in like the Warrior Nun. So a lot of Netflix shows have been preparing the mind today. So like I've watched a few episodes of the Warrior Nun. It's a very popular Netflix show. Basically on this. There's many shows that have this. Lucifer is another one that has these motifs in it. There's like 13 seasons of Lucifer. Making Lucifer seem like the sex guy, and it's catered to housewives, but it's got subliminal stuff too, just like Dan Brown's thing does. And so they all agree that the Bible is a fraud, but one side believes that it's necessary fraud to keep control of the slaves, the human cattle. The other side believes, no, it's a fraud, but we should reveal it. Now, so Luna, my concern is that her mother is saying that her father was a Catholic. She was raised as a Messianic Jew, though, and she herself, when I looked through her bio, it reads like an MK Ultra Project Monarch. If people have looked at Kathy O'Brien as one monarch, sex slave who was trained and then rescued, she's got a lot of, I think, value in her recounts, or her ability to piece together what she went through and what others have gone through. And this is a big outgrowth of the CIA's MK Ultra mind control program that generated psilocybines. The whole LSD drug culture that we have was carefully groomed from the 50s by the CIA, that had all of these like Gnostic Knights of Malta groups that had already taken control of the CIA, like Sidney Gottlieb, Alan Dulles. They're all members of the Order of Malta, which is tied to Opus Dei, right? So she's got this thing where she rose through the ranks, somehow became, got a career in the U.S. Air Force. Her on her mother's side, she's got a lot of family members who are deeply, deeply embedded in the U.S. Air Force. She ends up from 2009 to 2014 rising fairly. Her career is moving pretty ahead, but at the same time as her career is growing in the Air Force, this is before she gets political. She simultaneously gets gigs doing photo shoots for Sports Illustrated, and even on Wikipedia it says she was simultaneously a cocktail waitress at high-end strip clubs while she was working the Air Force. You're like, why are you doing all of these things at the same time? And then she's, finishes the career at the Air Force, goes into Maxim magazine, gets more photo shoots.
She was also like an Instagram influencer. She was like a social media influencer, apparently.
She was, yeah. That's so she got
which
her.
is pretty much just like beautiful women like posting pictures of themselves, and people follow and like them because they're beautiful women posting pictures of themselves, right? I mean, that's the currency basically in that sphere, the Instagram.
That's the economy.
Yeah, the economy.
That's
Exactly.
that's the industry. Yeah, that's the formula for success. Yeah, and then she becomes all of a sudden part of this political machinery, and it seems like a lot of patriots really respect her, and she said a lot of truthful things as a sort of patriot voice. Again, easy on the eyes, and can speak in public. But at the same time, her level of fervor for UFO disclosure is beyond. Like it's over the top. She's tied in with, it seems to me like she's been part of the program with David Grush and Luis Elizondo and that whole operation for a number of years now to sort of set the stage for the disclosure of UFOs as part of the whole, I'm doing a series of videos. I've published 3 of them on the Hidden Hand Behind UFOs just to get across the MI6, social engineering technocracy behind the creation of the UFO mythos. And I'm currently working on episode 4 now on the hoax of Roswell. So how the whole Roswell thing was crafted as a giant fake, the whole thing. And it was really just these characters very closely tied to Lawrence Rockefeller going back to the 70s who were behind it. And a lot of these characters overlap with one thing I've noticed is that they overlap directly as having played a direct role in the murder of JFK. J. Philip Corso being just one. They also overlap as J. Philip Corso does as an insider who is worked in Area 51, and he's a whistleblower, and he's part of this operation going back to the 70s. He's written books called on the Roswell Incident Part 2. Anyway, these guys, he was directly overseeing high-level Nazis that were being given new employment in the NATO secret army apparatus. He was directly overseeing assets directly tied to Lee Harvey Oswald as a tool, as a scapegoat. He was directly on the ground doing those things in the 60s. E. Howard Hunt is another guy tied to Watergate and also tied to JFK, who was the first one to leak the story that JFK was trying to disclose Area 51 UFO information to the public. He just started saying these things back in the 70s, and this has been part of what they've been preparing the groundwork for, I think, is to redefine how people think about what the CIA did and the FBI did, killing JFK and MLK and RFK, as not having anything to do with the actual unreconstructed Nazis that were part of the creation of a new world order agenda run by a new high priesthood, but rather it's all about aliens. So in my research, she the fact that she's such a part of that, at the same time as she's being put into such a high position of responsibility overseeing the disclosure of government secrets, implies some infiltration of our society or of the government. And as you pointed out, anything coming out of the FBI shouldn't be trusted. So the fact that they found 24,000 documents, number one is are the documents even legitimate? Because I know for a fact in my research that they have been caught creating false documents that they then release. In 2017, they released 19,000 newly found declassified documents from the FBI's Martin Luther King Jr. files. Some of them were legitimate documents. Other ones were clear forgeries that they just inserted into the documents,
to muddy the waters. Yeah, and then
and that's where Martin Luther King. They're like, oh, here's the transcript of the FBI's who had the bug in his hotel room the night before he was killed. That found that he was raping and beating all of these women in sex orgies. And it's like, yeah, but this is you just found this. There's no audio. There's no actual evidence. It's just a transcript. Anybody could have done that. And they did that with the Majestic 12 papers in the 80s, that an Air Force intelligence operative just sort of found these documents on microfilm that were presented in his door. And it became there's thousands and thousands of pages. It's even hosted on the FBI site even now. It's been proven that they're all forgeries that deal with the secret treaties that Truman and then Eisenhower signed with the aliens from a collaboration after the flying saucer crashed in Roswell and brought to Area 51. And they have all of these documents, and they made it seem like it was like and Roscoe Hillenkoetter, the CIA director, was part of the secret team of Majestic 12 grand diplomats. And they made it look real, but it's been proven that the typewriter that typed them was a typewriter that was manufactured only after 1965. So that couldn't have been documents produced written in 1950 or 47, like they project themselves to be. And there's so many other points that prove that they're forgeries, but they were just working on this sort of thing, which I feel like we could also expect a UFO twist in some of the papers that will be released pertaining to JFK, as though he was trying to blow the whistle and say the truth about Area 51 to the public, and the deep state knew that was going to be a security risk to America if JFK was allowed to do that, and then that for the sake of the security of freedom and capitalism, they had to kill JFK for the sake of the aliens. It's something so much bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
So that's how they're sort of gaming it, I think.
Yeah, I think that's certainly feasible. I mean, and just to be clear, like her being a bikini model or whatever 12 years ago, like does that disqualify her from serving in Congress? Absolutely not. Like, no, like I don't like individually, like out of context, I don't have a problem with the individual like elements. It's like people, I mean, like what was I doing 12 years ago, right? I mean, before you get into this stuff, before you wake up and you get into politics, it's like you have other things you do in your life. Fine. Like, I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with someone who pursued an acting career in Hollywood and then decided to go into politics because they woke up and educated themselves. No problem with that. It's the fact I don't even really have an issue with the fact that when she did run for Congress, I recall just distinctly, given the zeitgeist at the time of like being very, the woke culture was at like an all-time high. She leaned really hard into like her femininity, and she leaned into like, I'm pretty sure she even did more photo shoots. She may have, I can't recall. But she certainly leaned into like I'm a hot chick, like angle, and kind of promoted that as part of her campaign. I don't even necessarily have a problem with that. I mean, even though that, other people might have issues with it, I personally don't. It's like, fine. It's once you start to take all of that and put it into the context of she was in the Air Force. While she was in the Air Force, she was doing this stuff. While she was in the Air Force, like you said, she was a cocktail waitress at a high-end strip club. Like, what? Like, even not being in the Air Force, that's a big question mark. But while she's in the Air Force, she's doing that. That's strange. I mean, think about what like what Elvis was. That's kind of like what Elvis was. Like, Elvis was in the military. Like, he became a star. He was in the military. They basically used him as like a propaganda tool while he was in the military. There was a big element of that happening with Elvis, right? Where the military kind of like catered his service around like utilizing his celebrity to promote the branding and the interest of the military. I mean, that the military industrial complex, that was a big part of how they used Elvis. So I see a little bit of parallel there. And again, that just all kind of feeds into the whole military industrial complex thing, which certainly like puts it in the column of nefarious. Like, that's nefarious. That's not in the column of white hat. That's definitely in the column, in my opinion, of black hat. So when you can like layer all that together, construct all that together, that is certainly concerning. Then you put her in charge of this disclosure op, which people have seen coming for many years, because Trump talked about doing this during his first term. He talked about doing it during the Biden administration, where he was like, yep, when I get back in there, I'm going to release all this stuff. Kash Patel has been out there talking about doing it. I mean, it's something that we've expected for many, many years now. And now all of a sudden you're plugging this specific person with this background that you just described as like the gatekeeper, basically. And again, I just go back to, why aren't you just dumping all the documents online and letting us dig through them? And then if you want to come in with your own report and say, here's what we think, consulting with our people and looking at this, we think this document's bullshit. We think this one was probably made up. Like, we think that these are the ones that are the most legitimate, but at least by the time your report comes out, we've had a chance to dig through it like develop our own context, develop our own opinions, and then we might actually receive your report better than if you just give us the report raw, like without any prep. I mean, no matter what comes out now, like with this report, everyone's gonna meet with skepticism. Everyone's gonna be like, okay, well, I don't believe anything you write because you're not just giving it all to us in like a raw file.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think just knowing the MO of these magicians, because I do look at a lot of these operations like a magic trick, sort of the same way a magic trick works. And to your point, so before I say what I'm going to say first, to your point, you're right. Like if somebody is a bikini model and they're a moral, intelligent person, yeah, go ahead. You know, get into politics, like do your response, your citizen, be a citizen, right?
Yeah.
And
I mean, look at Melania Trump, man. Like I have the highest respect for Melania Trump, and she has like carried herself with nothing but dignity and grace. And dignity and grace as the first woman, and she has really like re-established respect, I think, for like that title, like around the world. So
absolutely,
I mean, perfect example.
Yeah, and you know, if somebody's grandfather, you know, fought in Germany in World War II, well, guess what? If you're a guy and you're over 18 and you're in Germany and it's World War II, you're probably going to end up fighting for the German army, right? It doesn't make you self-aware. I had a grandfather as well who fought with the Germans. He was a Nazi. Okay, sins of the father don't pass through, and frankly, it doesn't seem like he was all that into it. You didn't have a choice. It was like do that or die, you know, like
do that or get thrown in prison for, you know, deserting, right? I mean,
yeah, so okay, you can't hold that, but when you take into all of the other factors, there's definitely points of alarm, especially on the front, as you pointed out, that she actually does seem to authentically see Benjamin Netanyahu as like not maybe a messiah figure directly, but definitely a key part of the formula to usher in the messiah. Which gets really messy and dangerous for those who actually can make policy and have this type of fervent belief. They will legitimize all sorts of very destructive, bad things if they're if they've been taught that for the Messiah to come requires a time of cataclysm. They will find themselves thinking that the means justify the end. So even if massive death of innocence has to happen and I have to participate in it, I'm still doing God's will because I'm an instrument of this eschatological scenario that will then have a greater good as the outcome for it. So the fact that you've got this greater Israel, messianic, Kabbalistic, because it's very much rooted in Kabbalism, as the Knights Templar and the Rosicrucian revival were all tied very much to a revival of Kabbalism and Hermeticism as far as like spiritual alchemy is concerned. Like the fact that that's in play at the same time causes me also to be a little bit like more than a little concerned that there's a conjunction of what we're seeing in the Middle East, plus this whole push right now for disclosure, especially on the Area 51 aliens communicating with elites scenario. Like I do see that as two sides. It's become very much two sides of the same occult magic trick in my mind. Mm-hmm. And number three, they're putting into play people like Roger Stone too, who I don't know exactly what to he does seem to be a bit of a chaos agent, and Roger Stone is a dude who was a contractor for the Nixium cult, you know, the sex grooming cult that's tied to the Clara, the two Bronfman daughters, who managed.
Who's this you're saying?
Nixium, you know, Keith Rainier.
Yeah, but who's the person you're saying is?
Oh, Roger Stone.
Roger Stone. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, you know, he's been a high level insider installed around Nixon originally. He had direct ties to E. Howard Hunt, as I mentioned earlier, a key guy who played the role of Watergate. That was part of what took down Nixon from the inside. Because I think Nixon had his big problems, but I think he was still resistant to the whole Trilateral Commission takeover in general, and they had to remove him.
He was an outsider, yeah.
Yeah. So I think Watergate was a complete setup, just as part of the takedown of Nixon in order to set the stage for the Trilateral Commission takeover. But Roger Stone seemed to have played even though he acts like he's pro Nixon and has Nixon's face like tattooed on his body or on his back. He does seem to be tied to these characters. Now the Nixium cult, which is it seems to be like an off growth of Scientology, and the Bronfmans, like Edgar Bronfman, Charles Bronfman, they're high level privy counselors. They play a big role in the machinery that created the Zionist state in the originally, as well as like Mayor Lansky's operations, the ADL, all of this organized crime machinery was very much tied. I would say the Bronfmans were even more powerful than Mayor Lansky as far as having a dynasty. Mayor Lansky wasn't allowed to have a dynasty. He was allowed to be a very highly powerful, useful operative, but he was not allowed to have it. He wasn't granted a dynasty, which is what the Bronfmans were granted. Even today, like Stephen Bronfman, the current male heir, is the has been the personal advisor to Justin Trudeau, the treasurer of the Liberal Party of Canada. Like this is the key organized crime drug family, right? of all drug problems in North America. So the fact that these two Bronfman girls would be the devotees and give off their fortunes to Keith Raniere for the Nixium, that also employed Roger Stone, who's being brought back into play. He's being brought back onto Fox News because he's like the expert in JFK murder, and his whole assignment on that front has been to spin he's written books on this, to spin everything around LBJ as the primary villain in the story. And I'm not saying that LBJ didn't have some awareness, but there is no way that Lyndon B. Johnson
is the end of the rabbit hole. No way.
No. This goes so far. And LBJ even gave his last interview on his Texas ranch in 72. When I read it, it's available online, where he says candidly, I was deathly afraid that the same rifles plural that killed JFK were pointed to the back of my neck every single moment I was president. And that's why he didn't run for a second term. Like he was like, I want out. I want out. So he was not the mastermind at all, but that's what they're also pushing for, another aspect of satisfying if the official narrative is bunk, what is the better narrative that they're going to give us? Well, LBJ did the mechanical thing. He covered the mechanics of it because he wanted oil revenues and power, and aliens was the higher reason that it had to be done with the deep state of patriots who just cared about American security so much because they couldn't allow JFK to release the UFO files of Majestic 12. So I think that these two things are like very satisfying parts of the story that these creative writers have put out, that they're gearing us up for. And I really want people, I'm saying this so much because I want the audience here to be firmly strong, because we're going to be getting hit so hard. And I'm not even talking about the Project Bluebeam holograms in the skies, which they're going to do. They're going to do that, but they're not even there yet. And people are already prepped by decades and generations of propaganda around this stuff. And it's provably all fake. They're trying to destroy Christianity and bring in and redefine Christianity around a UFO cult. So that's there as a thing.
Yeah. And this is also such a good point, because and Matt kind of asked what I wanted to talk about today. And I think what I started to say, and then we kind of got to Anna Paulina Luna, and I said, let's just start there, is I was just listening to, and I'm still not finished listening to it, but right before we went live, I was listening to Colonel Douglas McGregor on Judge Napolitano's show, which I try to catch. He goes on like every week for like a 30-minute talk, and I try to watch it whenever I can, because it's always a good 30 minutes. It's a 30 minutes well spent. I recommend people just take that information in, because it's good information. And I was listening to what he was saying, and Napolitano has been incredulous for the past few months, certainly the past few weeks, about some of the rhetoric that's coming out of Trump and the rhetoric that's coming out of Trump's camp, specifically in regards to Israel, but also in regards to Russia and Ukraine. And asking McGregor, like, why is he saying this stuff that doesn't make any sense? And he's not even talking about the Gaza thing. He's talking about, in Russia, why is Trump repeating the lies that the Biden administration was also saying about Russia, Ukraine, that are so discrediting, like the rest of the world knows that these are lies. Even the Patriot movement, like the MAGA movement, was acknowledging that they were lies when they were coming out of Biden's mouth, coming out of Tony Blinken's mouth. But now you have Trump saying the exact same thing, like saying the same lies. Why is that? And of course, we could make the argument that it's psychological warfare. We could make the argument that he's playing a bigger game. Sure. But let's just take all of that and set it aside for a second and just look at the other people in his orbit, the people who we don't know as much about. Many of them are TV characters. Some of them come from Fox News. Some of them come from other places. People who you wouldn't necessarily have trusted had Trump not appointed them to be part of his cabinet, right? Really, the only reason you trust them to some extent is because they're now part of Trump's cabinet, and you think that you're extending like this trust that you put in Trump to them, which may or may not be warranted from what we know from the first Trump administration. There are plenty of bad actors he brought in and probably utilized them, like John Bolton would be an example, used them for his own purpose, right? And what McGregor was saying is he said, look, I think Trump is surrounded by people who are feeding him nonsense, who are giving him bad advice. He's like, I don't think any of these bad ideas or bad analysis is coming out of Trump's head. I think this is stuff that's being given to him by bad actors who are around him. And he said, and I think Napolitano asked, well, why aren't people? Is there anyone in the room who thinks the same way that you think? Because what I really like about McGregor, and I know a lot of people like McGregor, but what I like about him and what always drew me to him from the very beginning was that he is a career military man, but he doesn't see the world as a typical military industrial complex figure, right? He sees the world through the lens of peace, through the lens of diplomacy, through the lens of getting along, like not through the lens of like a warrior, like I'm going to dominate you and I'm going to be the strong man in the room, which is what you got out of Mattis. Like James Mattis was of that mindset, and like other people were of that mindset, right? Mad Dog Mattis, like be prepared to kill every person you meet. Remember that quote?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like I always liked McGregor for that reason, because he has a very reasonable, intelligent way of seeing the world. And so Napolitano asked, well, why does anybody see the world the way that you do? And he said, well, there's a reason that I'm not there right now. There's a reason that I wasn't asked to join the administration. And it's because these other people, and, whether or not any of this is true, is just coming out of McGregor's mouth. But he says, the people who are around him have a certain agenda and they want to push a certain way. And I am of the belief, and I've said this before, that I think Trump is leaning into that and using that momentum to take out certain dominoes. And then it's all hopefully going to swing back around and take those people out. In the end, we hope. But I think in the interim, we, the people, have a responsibility to do our own research, do our own thinking, think for ourselves, and kind of push from the ground up, like a populist grassroots push, to get our own sovereignty back. We can't just sit back and say, yeah, we trust Trump. Trump will take care of it. Whatever he says goes. That mindset's not going to work. We got to have our own way of thinking. So these people, though, that are in the Republican Party have had some time to lay plans and prepare for Trump 2.0. It's been very obvious for a long time that Trump was going to win this election. I think Chris Paul talked about for a year or two, the best possible outcome for the deep state would be let Trump win the election, let him come in and be a wrecking ball and destroy as much of the swamp as he possibly can. Just preserve very key institutions, particularly the election integrity stuff. Preserve the stolen election apparatus. Preserve that. Preserve maybe a few other like small things. Everything else can be destroyed. All the people can be fired. Take out all the agencies. We don't need 3 million bureaucrats anymore because we're going to AI. We're going to computers. We're making everything much more efficient anyway, right? So we can trim all that fat like they're doing us a favor. We have to be cognizant of that. We got to be cognizant of that there are people who have their own agenda, who have cozied up to Trump or in his orbit, and they have a vision for the future that may not align with our vision, and they know Trump isn't going to be there forever. Right. He's coming up at 80 years old. He's not going to be there forever. 20 years from now, I think it's safe to say Donald Trump is not going to be, dictating policy from the White House. I think, or at least even as like a figure in the ecosystem. Right. I mean, when he's 100 years old, I doubt he's going to be, hopefully maybe he will be, but I doubt he's going to be like an influential voice in politics. So who is going to be the influential voice? Well, these people probably want it to be them. And, I do worry about what their agenda is. A lot of them do worship this like death cult that you talk about a lot. They do seem to align with the George Bushes of the world and the Barack Obamas of the world when it comes to certain topics. I mean, a lot of them are super based and red pilled when it comes to, you know, the woke agenda and like the, you know, the low hanging fruit. But when it comes to other things like going to war with China or going to war with Russia or, you know, going to war with Iran, it's like they want those things.
Yeah, I know. It's like it's very satisfying to hear them rail against woke absurdity and you know, and guys with gimp masks in the military being normalized and you know, drag time story hour. It's satisfying to see people attack that type of thing, but at the same time, if those same people are still rallying like the worst kind of neocon, a war with a new crusader war with China or Russia or Iran, it's like, well, that's gonna kill everybody if you allow that. I mean, we're gonna give our consent to something that's gonna kill everybody who is standing up against the woke agenda is gonna be dead anyway, as well as the people who've been duped to be promoters of the woke agenda. Everyone is gonna lose. It's a lose-lose. So yeah, like we need to get some conversation on the issue of how did the US get transformed from an authentic anti-imperial nation state into this insanely unnecessarily overexpanded Pax Americana with 850 military bases imposed all over the world. And like, how did that happen? Let's maybe do what JFK was doing by talking about breaking the CIA up into 1,000 pieces and scattering it into the winds and looking to Africa and other nations as our partners in mutual development, maybe. And, you know, I think Trump has an orientation towards wanting to create business contacts around win-win development of things that are going to benefit everybody. I think that's his instinct is to do that, is to avoid war because war is bad for business. So that's all good. But then you got people like, I don't know. Have you seen this thing? I'd like to get your thoughts. Keith Kellogg, this little thing I noticed this week of his daughter being in charge of one of these big NGOs that was receiving a lot of USAID money, operating in Ukraine and Romania, sending supplies into Ukraine and getting US mercenaries out of Ukraine. Yeah, what's up with that?
I just actually heard somebody make a comment about that, or read somebody make a comment about that right before we went live. So I haven't dug on that. I need to look into that. That is very interesting. I mean, Keith Kellogg is a figure that has come up in John's research, his series in Devolution. Colonel McGregor, I've heard him talk about Kellogg. It doesn't sound like he has a very high opinion of Kellogg, but again, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. None of those things on their own are qualifying. Like, just because he's in John's series doesn't make him a white hat. Just because McGregor says, you know, bad things about him means he's a black hat. Like, this is all just stuff you kind of take in context. That, though, is a very interesting little tidbit, though. His daughter being in charge of an NGO that is running U.S. mercenaries in Ukraine is that is concerning. That's something that we need to dig in on. So, but that would be a perfect example of like people who we might want to trust because of they've said certain things or they've been affiliated with certain things in the past, but really they could be a Trojan horse for something bad. And we have to be very, very careful and very, very aware of that. Because let's be frank. Well, I'm sorry. Did you have something to say?
No, I was going to say, like, Alex Cristofaro at the Duran had a take on it where he's introducing the hypothesis that maybe Trump, again, it's like a Bolton thing. Maybe he's given him certain things to do to keep himself occupied while back channels are being opened up directly through Trump and people he maybe trusts a little bit more to Putin's network, whether Putin directly or the people directly around Putin, to really put out the fires. That's the hope. That's the best case scenario. That we have to hope for, that he's just giving some of these neocon hybrids with all sorts of compromised dimensions to their profile. He's given them things to do that ultimately are contained, hopefully. Because that's a big conflict of interest, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, like, look, if you put away all the context, if you put away all the past, you put away all the things you know about Donald Trump and all the other stuff, if you just were to look at his rhetoric, like you're 30 years, 40 years, 50 years in the future, and you're reading a textbook of this era of January, February 2025, and you were just to read Donald Trump's rhetoric, right? He sounds like a neocon. He doesn't just sound like a neocon. He sounds like a hyper neocon. He sounds more neoconish than George Bush, than John Bolton, than Lindsey Graham combined. He is taken, it's almost like he's taken that caricature and he's cranked it up and made it the most absurd, cartoonish version of itself, where he is like, we're going to literally own Gaza. This is our piece of property now. And they're like, well, who are you buying it from? He's like, we don't need to buy it. It's a demolition site. You know, I look at that as from multiple angles. Like I look at it like, wow, that's cringe and very concerning, like at its surface. But I also look at it like, he's literally just got, I pointed this out yesterday when Ash and I were covering one of these hearings, is I said, you know, for the past year and a half, anytime you talked about Gaza being like carpet bombed, you were accused of being a Hamas propagandist. It's like, oh, you're just pushing Hamas propaganda, right? Now all of a sudden, like, you know, the MSM and Netanyahu and the pro-Israel crowd were all saying that that was just nonsense, that it was all very surgical, it was all very strategic, like they were being very careful, they were preserving civilian life. Now, like, Netanyahu is openly admitting, yeah, I mean, Gaza, it is ground into dust. There's no building left standing in Gaza. And you look at pictures of it, and like I showed it to CanCon, who was he was infantry in Iraq or in Afghanistan, and he understands what the ordinance it requires to take a building down. And when he sees these sprawling landscapes of cityscapes that are just completely leveled, he like gasped. He was like, he's like, what it would require to do that level of damage is nothing short of a carpet bomb campaign where you're bombing every square inch of that city, of that area. And so now Netanyahu is openly admitting that the Republicans, the neocons, the pro-Zionist neocons are openly admitting, oh yeah, it's been completely carpet bombed into dust, and that's why we have to pull everyone out of there. That's kind of interesting to me. I mean, it's kind of interesting to me that Trump has kind of tricked all of them into admitting all of that and kind of adopting that position, because that's not gonna bode well. Those sound bites are not going to play very well if a war crime tribunal was ever impaneled against any of them. Where they're admitting that the whole place is uninhabitable because of their own actions. So that, like, I do kind of look at it that way, that Trump has taken all these positions, these neocon positions, cranked up the absurdity, made it very cartoonish, to the extent that everyone in the world is completely appalled. And they're like, this is insane. I can't believe you even just said that. The other thing is that, you know, the Arabs, while the Arabs are absolutely pushing back and they're saying this is a non-starter, we are not going to allow this to happen, they also aren't like abandoning Trump. I mean, they're also, you know, they're not leaving Trump's side. The Saudis are still investing $1 trillion in the United States. They're still building 2 Trump towers in Arabia. Like, they're still, you know, they haven't made any of those kind of announcements yet. Like, oh, we're no longer going to invest money. We're no longer going to let you build these towers. Like, none of that has come across the news wire yet. So that's the other interesting part, that the Arabs seem to still be firmly in Trump's corner while still saying there's no way we're going to let this happen, which of course they aren't. So those are the things that give me hope that this is, you know, to remain cautiously optimistic that Trump is playing a long game here, like a John Bolton kind of long game. But I still am not going to give anybody a free pass when it comes to everyone else, because I'm now turning my attention away from Trump and looking at how is everyone else reacting to this?
Yeah.
How are the people in the administration reacting to this? How are more importantly, the people reacting to this? And when I see people kind of like salivating over the idea of like occupying Gaza and like taking control of it, I'm like, dude, you're falling back into the neocon like Psyop.
I know. Like I've been warning since the very beginning on October 7th, like just having anybody who's really understood that Hamas was generated by the Muslim Brotherhood, and you look at the Muslim Brotherhood as what it is. It's the creation of Anglo-American occult imperial networks that were simultaneously creating the Quatuor Coronati Lodge that in the 19th century was setting the stage for the creation of an ethno-Jewish state. It's those same Freemasonic circles that were tied to Theosophists like Jamal al-Din al-Afghani, who was the creator of Salafism. He was a satanic Gnostic who was a traveling companion of Madame Blavatsky. This guy was like tied directly to the British Cairo office in British Freemasonry from the 1870s, 80s, 90s. That's the guy who created, as a joke almost, he was laughing at the Muslims that would fall into his Salafist philosophy that he himself didn't believe in. He saw it as just a tool, like the Opus Dei sees Christianity as a useful tool of getting dumb Christians to become weaponized against their own interests. That's the way
to become killers. Yeah.
To become killers. Yeah. That's the way it works. And so that's the thing that was in play. And the whole objective was to get to create a radicalization of people who would suffer so much and have already suffered even before October 7th, 2023. Even before that, they had suffered so much injustice. When you do that to somebody multi-generationally, you create radicalized people who have nothing to live for except revenge. And when you add into it a religious sort of overtone, then you've got something super weaponizable. And if you can get that grouping to be sent in outside of the boundaries of Gaza into Jordan, into Egypt, into Saudi Arabia, then all of a sudden you're massively expanding the opportunities to create attacks against Israel, which is what Netanyahu wants. They want to be attacked because they want the excuse to go and militarily invade like they did in the 60s, in the 70s. But they want that excuse to say, we had to defend ourselves, which is why we had to take over Jordan. We had to take over Egypt or Saudi Arabia or anywhere because it's in their defense. So this is part of the trap. And I mean, to the degree that Trump is abiding by bad advice coming from these types of dishonest actors who are encouraging him to think that this is a good, constructive motive with no negative outcomes, is super, super dangerous. As you said, like cutting the fat from this heavily overbloated, useless bureaucracy does benefit very bad actors too. You know, if they're trying to put America on a war footing to combat Russia and China and Iran, then the type of liberal bureaucracy that they've built up over decades is not going to cut it. There's too much mediocrity built in the system, so they have to.
So why not let MAGA get their pound of flesh, you know, feel the catharsis of it and think that they have their moral victory, right? You have your moral victory. You can feel better that things have been fixed or things have been addressed. And some people, not everyone, but some people are going to get complacent and say, okay, like we did it. Like the swamp's been drained. We fired 3 million people, but that's only one facet of the swamp, right?
Yeah, and you know, I not to be, you know, doomers gloomers, because we're not saying that this is the only thing in play, but
exactly
to ignore the fact that this type of scenario, this type of planning is not active in the minds of very, very bad actors with influence who are exerting a negative influence, disrupting a lot of very good, reasonable things. Even now, as we speak, it would be naive and dangerous to ignore it. Because like there's certain things that if you get, for example, another point that is highly concerning in Canada, both the liberals and the conservatives are both for weaponizing and militarizing the Arctic. Even now, Pierre Poilievre, who's the conservative, the head of the Conservative Party, he might become prime minister. Definitely Mark Carney will become prime minister as the interim. Whether he's going to become the full prime minister or not when there's an election is yet to be seen, but he's going to be the prime minister as Mark Carney. But first of all, he just gave a speech, Pierre Poilievre, saying that his first priority will be to set up an array of military bases in the Arctic that fall into conjunction with what Justin Trudeau already adopted in April of 2024. As far as a $2.4 billion package towards building long-range missiles in the Canadian Arctic, which was something Dick Cheney had tried to do and failed back in 2005. We had the wits back then to say no, but now all of a sudden it's okay to do that. And in the defense policy review that was upgraded in April 2024, which Justin Trudeau signed off on, it directly calls out for a preparation for a war with Russia and China over the Arctic as another platform. So both sides are for that. So when I hear Trump taking on advice, or, you know, I don't think it came from him, but this whole idea of creating an Iron Dome over North America, that seems to fall directly into, if anybody looks at what is the Iron Dome, I mean, that's the Israeli missile shield that's been built up. Now, to call for something like that is to call for a complete militarization if the view is to prepare for the war with Russia and China. No, I think Trump has shown in his first term, and at least vocally in his second term, an intention to work. He prefers to build business contacts and build rail in cooperation with Russia and with China in the Arctic. That's his orientation. But if he's taking on advice that's pushing this other thing, which falls too much in alignment with the sort of, North American technate idea that we saw in the 30s that was very much pro-fascist under Elon Musk's grandfather, that he was pushing it, or the North American Union of taking like the Euro model and putting into North America with a new technocratic command and control. That's a super bad trap, and we should not fall for things like that.
For sure. Yeah.
So.
Well, the caveat I could point out there, though, is because I have seen there is some news about Trump and Putin interested in talking about denuclearization. So I could see potentially a situation where, and this could just all be narrative, like it, to what extent did these things actually get built out? If we were theoretically to have a Iron Dome, like a system that could stop any projectile, hypersonic, ICBM, what do they call it? The ones that go way high up in the stratosphere.
Oh,
yeah, like all of those. Like if it could block any projectile, then nukes all of a sudden become completely obsolete, and there is no longer MAD is basically removed, and nukes are no longer the only thing you have to worry about is like a micro nuke, or something like a briefcase bomb or something like that, right? But you couldn't do a projectile. That then totally changes the entire geopolitical landscape, and I think ends the quote unquote nuclear age, and like the threat of major superpowers going to like obliterating one another in a matter of minutes. And like Chris Paul and others have talked about that potentially being the end game of some of these discourses. So I do see maybe a potential benefit in pursuing that, but I agree with you. If the end game is to do it in order to go to war with someone so they can't attack us, that's obviously something we have to be aware of. The other thing is, having like studied like the Art of the Deal lately for my other show, and just reading like Trump's own thoughts from 40 years ago, it is interesting to hear in like his own words when he's like in his 30s and 40s, talking about, I guess he'd be in his 30s, talking about the way he thinks, the way he analyzes information. He was very clear in his book. He said, look, I do not hire experts. I don't hire consultants. I don't hire surveyors. I don't want to know the survey. I don't want to know the polls. Don't do a poll. I don't want to know the poll. This is like him in his 30s talking about real estate deals. He's like, I like to go look at the raw data myself. He's like, I may take input from people, of course, like I may consult with people, but I'm always going to want to see the raw data myself. I'm always going to want to, ingest everything, think about it, and then make my own decision based on my own instincts. So that to me seems like a complete deviation from what we're seeing right now, where it seems like he's listening to these really, really bad actors, which is why, again, like, I don't know if I trust that what we're hearing is what he actually thinks in his heart. It's just maybe he's playing some sort of a long game. So those are just the things that I think about like as I'm watching this stuff, and it seems very relevant. But yeah, I mean, but again, this is so much bigger than Donald Trump. Like this whole thing is about the future after Donald Trump. Like we're going to have responsibilities here to pick this thing up and keep it moving. And if we just become complacent and just trust that whoever these authorities are that Trump has surrounded himself with are the next, are the heir apparent to him, maybe they're not. Like maybe he is surrounding himself right now with John Bolton's for a different reason. And we should just remain objective, keep our discernment, remain vigilant, because we don't want to fall back into a George Bush 2.0 situation where people are waving the American flag and it's Djangoism and it's nativism, nationalism, Djangoism, all the worst instincts from that, which gets you into a situation where you want to go to war with another country. For reasons that don't make any sense, that make no sense whatsoever. People you've never met, cultures you're not familiar with, places you've never visited, but suddenly you want to destroy every city in that country. It's like you might be a victim of a psychological warfare operation.
Well said. Well said. No, I think that's a really, really great set of insights and points of wisdom. So no, I think I'm looking at the time here. It's 1:12. I know that we have a limited amount of time, and I have one more commercial to run before we start transitioning out.
Yeah.
Do you want to show another political point before we go to some of the Q&A or the comments?
Trump just posted like 20 minutes ago. Trump just posted about a phone call apparently him and Putin just had, and it's a long post. So
Good.
Why don't let's do the ad read, and then we'll come back and read the post, and then we'll do rants and
yeah. All right, that's good. Yeah, it's just that for me at around 1:30, I should have said this. I have a hard stop, but we still have a lot more time before 1:30. So yeah, let's do that. Let me hit the ad. It is My Pillow. Here we are.
I'm excited to announce that we're having our first ever mega sale on overstock clearance and brand new products. For example, save over 50% on this season's flannel sheets. Queen size only $59.98. Kings only $69.98. They sell out fast every year, so order now. Save 20% on our brand new My Crosses. They're designed in the likeness of the one I've worn every day for over 20 years. They come in men's and women's, and they're made right here in the USA. Get our 2025 six-piece My Towel sets for only $29.98. Our initial quantities are extremely low, so get them now before they go. And our best-selling standard My Pillows, just $14.98. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our first ever mega sale. But wait, remember that $75 free shipping rule? Well, that ship is sailed, because right now, every order ships absolutely free.
All right. Cool. So let's see what this message was by Trump.
Sweet. And I haven't read this yet, so we're all reading this together for the first time. So this is from Trump's True Social. He said this was posted at 11:53 a.m. So I'm sorry, it was an hour and 20 minutes ago. I just had a lengthy and highly productive phone call with President Vladimir Putin of Russia. We discussed Ukraine, the Middle East, energy, artificial intelligence, the power of the dollar, and various other subjects. We both reflected on the great history of our nations and the fact that we fought so successfully together in World War II, remembering that Russia lost tens of millions of people and we likewise lost so many. We each talked about the strengths of our respective nations and the great benefit that we will someday have in working together. But first, as we both agreed, we want to stop the millions of deaths taking place in the war with Russia-Ukraine. President Putin even used my very strong campaign motto of common sense. We both believe very strongly in it. We agreed to work together very closely, including visiting each other's nations. We have also agreed to have our respective teams start negotiations immediately, and we will begin by calling President Zelensky of Ukraine to inform him of the conversation, something which I will be doing right now. I have asked Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Director of the CIA John Ratcliffe, National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, and Ambassador and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff to lead the negotiations, which I feel strongly will be successful. Millions of people have died in a war that would not have happened if I were president, but it did happen, so it must end. No more lives should be lost. I want to thank President Putin for his time and effort with respect to this call and for the release yesterday of Mark Fogel, a wonderful man that I personally greeted last night at the White House. I believe this effort will lead to a successful conclusion, hopefully soon. Yeah, so all very encouraging. And you know, one thing that McGregor did point out with Napolitano, I should have added, is that the one thing that was encouraging to him is that the rhetoric that Trump keeps using, despite all of the other neocon nonsense that he's espouting, is that his top priority is to stop the killing. He wants people to stop dying. So it's like, as long as that is his top priority, I think everything else, and that remains like his North Star, so to speak, I think everything else can be kind of, to some extent, taken with a grain of salt, because a smart, discerning man, and I think Trump is a smart, discerning man, and I think he has access to enough intel to understand that, like, his rhetoric with Gaza is going to lead to more people dying if we pursue that exact plan. Stuff like that. I think if you keep that in mind, that his priority is legitimately to keep people from dying, then preventing more war is going to be the priority, which means you have to bring the warmongers to rest, keep them at bay, and then hopefully maybe even replace them in certain instances with more reasonable people.
Yep. No, agreed. And that is I do like hearing. I need to hear more of that, and the fact that there was. I mean, it'll be good when we actually get some hard meetings, direct meetings with Putin and Trump and others, so Lavrov and others. That'll be really good, and we'll see what comes out of that, because there's something irreplaceable when you actually meet with, like, have human to human contact. You can get so much done in politics, especially in a republic like the United States, where the executive has an immense amount of authority to cut through all sorts of red tape. And if you can get a human agreement with another human being, you can get things done that you couldn't get done in a million years in a parliamentary bureaucracy. It just couldn't be done. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's good. So yeah, any final thoughts before we move on to the?
No, I think that's good. I mean, the other thing that I think broke maybe right after we went off the air last week was that Riyadh is being considered for a potential Putin Trump summit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so like they're saying either UAE or Riyadh. I think Riyadh is going to be the obvious choice. You know, like MBS, like that moment, that Kodak moment of MBS bringing Putin and Trump together to shake hands and make peace over Ukraine. And then, as Trump just said in his post, I mean, imagine Putin coming to the White House. That's going to be a pretty big moment too. So, yeah, I think that's kind of my final thought.
Yeah, no, that would be amazing. I mean, I don't think Putin's done that since the days of George Bush. Maybe he did it once with Obama. I'm not too sure if Putin came to the U.S. under Obama.
Him and Hillary met, but I can't remember where. That was when she had the stupid red button, remember? But yeah, that's I can't remember where they met. They definitely met in person. I just don't know if it was on U.S. soil or somewhere.
I would almost advise Putin not to do that. I'd prefer that it probably just happened in a
wait until we round up all the psychopaths and put them in Guantanamo Bay, and then you can come visit.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
All right, we have some rants and some boosts. Brogiant, I hope I'm saying that right. $5. Could we get an episode about what you've learned true Islam to be compared to what we've been psyoped into? Couldn't think of a better time to counter the current push going on to fear and hate Muslims. That's a good question. I don't know if I'm necessarily qualified to do like a full show about that. I did do a writing about that last summer, or maybe it was 2 summers ago. And I might do another write-up on that as well. But yeah, let me think about that, because I you know, I don't know if I'm qualified to do something like that where it's like I would be able to accurately convey it all. I've certainly looked into it enough to know that I was lied to, and that was enough for me to defect from the official narrative. But I don't know if I'm qualified enough to like lead a thoughtful discussion where I'm actually teaching people about Islam, because I don't know if I know enough about it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think to myself if I know any. Like, I know I do know of a few, but I don't know if I know them. I'm trying to think of people I directly know who are both Muslim as well as moral, right, like great patriots, who could also participate maybe in a discussion, like a roundtable type of discussion, to clarify certain
where we could like ask them questions. Yeah, let's think about that.
All right,
it's a good thought. Thank you for the thought, and we will definitely put that into the into motion, because I think that, and then we still need to do it's becoming more and more I think relevant with all this going on, is doing like a show about the modern psyop on Zionism and like how that was all infused into modern politics. We should definitely do one on that. All right, and then we have some boosts.
So somebody in the comment section wrote that Stormy Daniels was part of the NXIVM recruitment parties. Fascinating lead. Thank you, whoever put that out there. I forgot. I didn't take note of their name, but that's very useful. Very, very useful indeed. So,
yes, that is interesting. Okay, SJ Taylor 11, $50. Thank you. I really appreciate everything you both do in researching historical and current events, and then communicating your analysis with those of us that are open to learning and thinking beyond the narratives. Well, thank you for the boost. Thank you for the feedback. Yeah, I mean, it's cool to do this show and to have people give that kind of feedback and get something out of it. And ultimately, I think what we're trying to do here is just cultivate a curiosity more so than convey like a specific idea or specific truth, right? I mean, we want people to be asking the questions and defecting from the official narrative, so to speak, of what they've been told, and just kind of pursue their own understanding of the world.
Yeah, I agree, and I that's sort of my MO as well. Is to I'm trying to encourage myself to withhold from absolute judgments of things. Like there are certain things that I've discovered, and I know that I earned my ownership of the feeling of conviction of certain core things in my worldview. But I know that those convictions only occurred through immense amounts of error, of self-reflection, and a lot of rigor, like a lot of reading that I had to learn how to hold myself to certain standards to get that done right. And I see so many people, including myself, over the years, jumping to conclusions without earning the feeling. Like the feeling it's like a paycheck that you can't just get without working. Um, and that requires like looking for the paradoxes, looking for where your theory of something that explains why something is, where does the theory break down? Where are the cracks? And those paradoxes, it takes a while to hone the mind to look for paradoxes in a self-referential way, where you're thinking about where is my subjective mind failing to account for something which is resulting in an obvious reality that I can see, but I don't understand. So that requires then the art of generating educated hypotheses. And that's not something I see very many people doing. That we want the right answer. And I think part of this is the conditioning of school that's encouraged us falsely to try to get the right answer. Go to even to the point that getting the right answer is more valuable than even knowing what the question was. And the more we have allowed ourselves to get into those habits, the less capable we are of diagnosing our current calamity or even thinking through constructive solutions. So just, yeah, the art, and this is why I love just having the show with you, because you've honed your mind in a similar manner. And so just trying to get people to think about the art of hypothesis formation is really key. It's the process which is more important than the crystallized answer. So yeah.
A good question is worth infinitely more than a good answer. I think that's a good way to view it. So for sure. Yep. And then last one is Pig 4801, $50. Love this show. I learned so much. One question: how can Trump broker a lasting deal with Israel and Palestine when the factions inside Israel are not on the same page? Won't it just start up again regardless of any deal? Same with Ukraine, Russia. That is an excellent question. I think that's probably the crux of the problem that Trump is facing and wrapping his arms around. And that is a very, very important consideration. How do you do that? And I don't have the full answer, but I can say that just observing how I've seen the Arabs all be brought together, the Arabs never got, not just the Arabs, but the Muslims in general across the entire Middle East have never gotten along. Certainly over the past century plus. Now all of a sudden they're all on the same page, so to speak. Doesn't mean that they don't have differences. They absolutely have bickering and arguing going on between them, and they have differences that they're still resolving, and they will continue to work through and resolve. But I think what's gotten all of them on the same page so that they can at least start to trust one another is they have a common purpose. They have a common vision for the future that they're all trying to work towards, where they can see like a light at the end of the tunnel, as opposed to before like MBS and this vision that he brought for the future of the Middle East, like being the next Europe in his own words, was they were all fixed on the past and like what had happened in the past and who had wronged who and how do we get justice for that and how do we get revenge. And that, of course, Israel plays into that a lot. So I think getting people to focus on the future and having something to work towards is certainly helpful. You also have to remove, obviously, like the really bad apples you can't be reasoned with. So it's a process, but that's just kind of my rudimentary, reductive answer to that.
Yeah, no, that's really it. There's no simple answer, but the core part of the recipe for the answer is what you just outlined. It's in the future. Obviously, like you said, doing kinetic hard, like in a surgery, when you have somebody who's in a really bad place, they could feasibly die, and you need to have a surgery, but it's not just the surgery. You also need to think about rehabilitation, because they could easily relapse, back into whatever cancer was getting them. So you got to go in there with hard cuts to get the tumor out. Perhaps you got to do certain things like that, which involves, I think, things that we've seen Putin do with the takedown of big chunks, not all of it, but big chunks of the deep state saboteurs in Russia. We've seen that in China with millions and millions of saboteurs of the Chinese deep state being taken down through a battle. There's a fight. Saudi Arabia, same thing. We're seeing it now in the United States. You know, bad actors being taken down who would otherwise sabotage good discussions, good solutions in the future. But that's not enough. You got to then rehabilitate. You got to think about, look, how do we get a healing of the transgenerational pain and desire for vengeance, which might be very well founded, and people have suffered so much wrong. Look at people in the Gaza or other places. So that requires a future orientation. We have to that's the solution. It's not in the present. There's no solutions in the present. You have to imagine a necessary and possible future scenario and build towards it. Introduce water desalination, introduce, they used to be called the Crash Science Project. Like, get people to organize themselves around their unborn children and grandchildren and do things that are going to be objectively in the benefit of everybody, because we're human. We all need food. We all need water. We all need oxygen. We all need basic things, dignity in life. We need freedom. So, like, do the things that are going to make those things better. Engineering projects, cultural projects, exchange of cultural insights and poetry and other things, like all of that, full spectrum. But it's all in the future. And then you work towards it. And in time, the healing will begin. The spiritual healing will take time, but it will happen. And then in a few generations, you'll be able to have like a proper, healthy set of points of common respect and mutual love between people representing different cultures whose ancestors fought like hell in eye for an eye forever wars, but who now have a chance. So that begins today. So you're totally right. We don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know what the formula is, but we know that those are the characters. That's the character of the solution. Whatever it's going to be, it's going to have those properties to it. So yeah.
Well said. You know what I just realized when you were saying all that is that my wife, whenever we're trying to get my toddler to stop doing something that's like bad or annoying, like I always jump in there and be like, no. I'll try to like reason with them and explain why you don't do it. And she's like, no, that's not what you do. She like taught first grade for many years. She says, you focus on something positive and you give them something positive to say, like, to distract them, to get them away from doing the thing that's annoying or bad. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, that's exactly what it is. Like, give them something to look forward to, give them something to like distract them instead of like reprimanding them for doing something bad. I'm like, yeah.
As above, so as below, right?
Yeah. Just treat everyone like a toddler, and that's how you make world peace.
The world is my daycare. All right. Dude, it's a pleasure. Always great.
Yeah. Let me see. I'm going to change the background just so I think there's an outro video. Yeah, right here. All right. Everyone have a good day. Hit the thumbs up, please. And we will see you next week.
All right.
See you.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us. And don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.